Hogwarts, rising as Harry's twin with power. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 81, Pure Prince's Bloodline. Harry and Darren went down to the basement together. A crack opened in Snape's office, and Darren knocked on the door, quietly waiting at the door. Harry didn't want to wait and found that there was no sound. He said with some hesitation, "Maybe Snape is not here, then." He quietly opened the office door. Maybe he could steal the book. Harry. Darren only had time to whisper his name before he rushed in. Well, Darren is just pretending. He didn't intend to disrupt the plot. It is likely that Dumbledore had arranged this, and he interrupted it, and the next one would appear. I have to trouble the old man at such an old age, setting the plot from scratch. As soon as Harry entered the office, he was stunned. Because he saw a terrible scene. Snape was pulling his robe up to his knees, blood and flesh blurred from one of his legs, and Filch was handing him a bandage. Damn thing, how can a man hold 3 heads? He said with a scolding grin. Harry wanted to go out. He sensed that he came in at this time and would most likely trigger Snape's deduction. However. Potter! Snape roared. Harry was terrified and breathless. He stuttered and said, I want to get my book back. Get out, get out. Snape lowered his robe, his angry face crooked, and looked at Harry as if he were going to give him an avada. Harry ran out of Snape's office with a rolling belt, and quickly climbed several flights of stairs to a crowded place, so that he felt safe. Suffered, why didn't Darren come down? Harry was stunned. Only then did he discover that Darren had not followed him. Didn't Snape, the bastard, catch him and torture him? No, he has to hurry down. Just as Harry returned. Darren was already standing inside Snape's office. What did you come in to do? Snape's tone was a little bad. When the 2 cubs of the Potter family saw him injured, he felt very faceless. It was as if he had shown weakness in the presence of his enemies. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now publishes a temporary task, walk over to Snape, pick up the bandage next to it, and wrap it around Snape. I was not happy, and said to Professor Raid, why don't you go to the school infirmary when you are injured? If you do this again, I won't go to the school doctor's office next time I'm injured. Ding, after the mission is completed, get the pure bloodline of the Prince family, will the host receive the task? The princes? He remembered that it was the family that Snape was fucking in. The bloodline he had obtained before was the modeled prince's bloodline. Is it time to purify him? Pick up, Darren said hurriedly. The modeled prince's bloodline could give him so many benefits, let alone pure prince's bloodline. Say, what the hell are you here for? Snape asked again. Darren pursed his lips, and he slowly raised his head, with some disapproval in his eyes. Snape was in a bit of a trance. He remembered that Lily had looked at him the same way. She said she wouldn't let him mess with those people anymore. Say those people are bad people. He ostensibly agreed, but in fact secretly studied black magic with those people and made potions for them. This caused Lily to become more and more angry until she broke with him. Snape had some breakdowns. Why did he do that in the first place? He was almost in tears. And while his heart ached, Darren had already taken the bandage on his desk and wrapped it around his leg in a circle. Professor, you're injured, why don't you go to the school hospital? If you do this again, the next time I am injured, I will not go to the school hospital. Ding, mission accomplished. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Pure Prince's bloodline. Pure Prince's bloodline, fusion grants potions talent plus 20 and potions innovation plus 60, earning the gaze of the prince's ancestors. This. Darren's shocking discovery. His current potions talent has reached 38, and his potions innovation ability has reached 80, and his current potions innovation talent should be stronger than Snape, right? He quickly suppressed his smile and made a questioning look on Snape. Snape was pulled back to reality by his unhappy questioning. He snorted. Unhappy moved his legs away and looked at Darren with a snort. Can you compare with me? As far as the physical fitness of this little cub is concerned, does not go to the school hospital to find death? And also. When the little cub said this, he almost forgot about the last time the cub sent himself to the school hospital. Very well, you don't say I forgot, because you were reckless last time, so Slytherin confinement, a week. Darren personally guessed that Snape was trying to deduct points for him. However, when he thought he was a Slytherin, he changed it to confinement. Confinement is confinement. The old Slytherin maid, at best, let him write his homework. Is he still afraid of this? Where to write an assignment instead of writing? Writing homework here, he couldn't ask Snape. Although this guy's tone is not very good, the lecture is still quite detailed. It's a one-on-one teaching. But that idea can't be said. Otherwise, this old professor who does not talk about martial arts may be ashamed and angry and give him a drill in his heart. So he could only face bitterly and respond with a depressed yes. Huh. Give this to Harry Potter and let him. Forget it, recklessness is Gryffindor's biggest drawback, and it's good that you're in Slytherin. Snape threw Harry's book to Darren. The tone is noticeably much better. Darren answered, and obediently walked out of the office with the book. As soon as he went out, he caught Harry's worried eyes. Darren, are you all right? Snape is not hanging you upside down in the office to punish you, Harry said in horror. Snape was so furious just now, how could he have spared his Harry Potter brother? No, Professor Snape is very kind. Kind? Harry was somewhat unable to understand the word. As far as Snape is concerned, what does it have to do with kindness 5? Episode 82, I want to save my brother. I think Snape wants to steal what we saw last time, guarded by those 3 monsters. Harry mysteriously called Darren, Ron, and Hermione together, told what had just happened, and came to his own conclusions. Although Darren had previously said that Snape was kind and had brought his book back to him, he did not feel that Snape was a good man. What kindness? That's Darren, too kind to see anything as a good person. As for Snape giving him back the book? Isn't that what Snape should be? Originally, it was for no reason to find a fault to receive his book, and not to send him back on his own initiative, which was Snape's cunning. It's just that he said this, obviously not to get Darren's approval. Impossible, Professor Snape wouldn't do that. Darren dismissed Harry's speculation. After all, he was such a simple person, how could he not believe that Snape would do such a thing? Plus, Snape really didn't do it. People are righteous from the beginning of the book. Harry knew Darren didn't believe it. So he hurriedly said, on the eve of Halloween, Ron and I saw that he wanted to pass by the big dog, and you didn't believe Ron. I bet with my broom that Snape had let the monster in to divert attention. Darren, you don't know, after you were sent to the school infirmary that day, he was extremely angry. It must be because you killed the troll so quickly and disrupted his plans. Harry was right. It really looks like that. It was Darren who almost laughed out loud. Child, you bet this thing with your broomstick. In the 3rd part, your broom is likely to be shattered because of your bet and crashed into the beating willow. If Sirius hadn't bought you a firebolt, maybe you'd have to ride the school broom to catch the golden snitch. So this bet can't be played casually. 2,000 gold gallons. However, he is now a well-behaved child, or a well-behaved child who does not know the plot. So he showed a look of disbelief and explained seriously, Professor Snape is angry, just because I was so reckless, and I should have fled there with you instead of dueling with it. As for the place you and Ron see where he wants to pass through that 3-headed dog, it should be that he wants to see if something is still there. After all, professors are also teachers at schools, and it's normal to check things, Darren said clearly. It looked like they were trying to convince Harry of them. But Harry didn't believe it at all. They said to Darren in a childlike tone, okay, Darren, you're right, then you do your homework now, let's go out. Darren was very tempted to say, are you going out and looking for a new place to discuss Snape? However, remembering his personality, he could only respond to a sound, and obediently sat in his seat to write homework. Fortunately, the 3 of them did not wait long to return, and their faces were filled with pity for Darren. It looks like Darren has been brainwashed by Snape. Darren ignored their thoughts, and by the end of the 1st grade they would naturally understand their mistake. Perhaps what Harry should be worried about now is his Quidditch game tomorrow. It was Harry's first match. Darren was glad Snape wouldn't let him play the sport, after all, he didn't want to be seen like a monkey in full view of the public. Early the next morning. The weather was clear and cold. Darren saw that Harry had been dragged to Quidditch Stadium early. Even just had time to eat a piece of sausage. It was 11 o'clock. The whole school sat in the stands around Quidditch Stadium. They held binoculars and excitedly showed off their broomstick riding experience to those around them. This game was a match between Gryffindor and Slytherin. So Darren was strongly asked that when he was playing, he must not be allowed to go to Gryffindor. In front of the bitter Becky sister, Darren still nodded honestly and recognized. Anyway, if you want to run, who can stop him? On the Quidditch field, Marcus, the captain of the Slytherin team, is shaking hands with Gryffindor with a sinister smile. The 2 of them give someone else the feeling of having their hands broken. Fortunately, Mrs. Hodge blew the whistle. The race is on. Darren watched with some excitement, and the game flying around in the sky seemed to be a little interesting. But it wasn't him who went up the premise. He had just seen Harry's face, distorted by the wind. If Colin is here next semester, I'm afraid he can use his camera to shoot him an emoji. Darren swore that he would never participate in such an image-destroying sport. The Quidditch game was very intense, and both sides played real fire. Harry suddenly lifted into the air, as if he had seen the figure of the golden snitch. Just the next second, his broom trembled like a eater. What's going on? Darren stood up worriedly. He anxiously spun around in the same place, as if he hadn't brought a broom, he would have rushed up to help. My brother. No, I've got to go to the professor. ding, father plus 30, ding, father plus 20, ding, father plus 50, ding. A small wave of the Holy Father is worth the account. Darren looked even more worried. Well, the professor has already started to save him. Didn't you see all the professors holding their wands? As long as Potter falls, you can catch him. What is the matter with you? Don't you walk around with me, my eyes are all turned by you. Cassandra stopped him impatiently. Pointed to the teacher's stand. She just doesn't understand what this guy is running around with. Someone who did something to Harry Potter was obviously the hand of a Death Eater. The Death Eaters have attacked Harry Potter, can they spare such a small cub as him? He also has to run out of the net, be careful of being caught by others. Of course, this guy can't say this to this guy. If this guy knows that it was a Death Eater, I'm afraid he wouldn't be afraid not to say it, and he would have to go to his brother to die. Oh, stupid Potter cubs. Episode 83. Snape is a good man. Darren obviously didn't know what Cassandra was thinking. However, when he heard Cassandra's words, he immediately thought of earning the father's value from another angle. He drew his wand, pointed it warily in Harry's direction, and said nervously, "You're right, if my brother falls, I can catch him. Ding, father plus 10, ding, father plus 20, ding, father plus 10, ding, father plus 10, ding." Darren sighed a little. It was obvious that it was Slytherin who was watching him at this moment. The eyes of the others were probably on the protagonist. Looking at Fred next to Harry, Darren was crying with envy. If only he had been there. He absolutely had to fight to the death to stop Harry, and this kind of brotherly love drama must have touched many people. I knew he should go to the Quidditch competition too. Unfortunately, he just thought, and Snape wouldn't agree. Okay. Harry suddenly stabilized his body. Then swooped down to the ground on a broomstick. He covered his mouth with his hand and spat out a golden snitch from his mouth. I caught it. Harry happily raised the golden snitch in his hand. Haha, my brother won, my brother caught. Darren's cries of excitement echoed through the stands, causing Slytherin in the stands to roll their eyes. Oh, Gryffindor cubs. Fake Slytherin. Ding, father plus 10, ding, father plus 20, ding, father plus 5, ding. With a small amount of Holy Father value in the account, Darren had also excitedly climbed over the stands and came to Harry's side. Where did he get caught? He was clearly about to eat the golden snitch. Flint of the Slytherin team roared angrily. But no one paid any attention to him. Gryffindor won the tournament with 160 to 70 points. 20 minutes later. Darren had been taken by Harry to Hagrid's hut. Hagrid gave each of them a cup of strong tea. Ron took a sip of his tea, then waved his hands and said, "It's Snape, Hermione, and I saw it." It was Snape who was chanting a spell on Harry's broom. Of course he saw Darren's disapproving gaze, and immediately continued, "It's true, I've read it in a book, and he's chanting evil spells like this, otherwise why would he stare at Harry's broom and always read the words, huh?" Darren showed a shocked expression. But he still thought it was impossible, so he tried to explain, maybe Professor Snape is undoing Harry's curse. It was just that before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Ron. He said eagerly, "Darren, don't you understand? If anyone in this school wanted Harry to die, it would have to be Snape. Otherwise you say, besides Snape, who else would do that to Harry?" Darren tilted his head and thought. It was found that if he stood on a position where he did not know anything, it seemed that Snape really had only one option. Since that's the case. He stood up a little angrily. "I'm going to go to him and ask him why he is chanting mantras on his brother, and I want to report him to Professor Dumbledore." Ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 50. Among the 3 children who were moved to tears, there was a dazed giant in between. Hagrid said hesitantly, "Although I am very moved, can you tell me what really happened?" Harry pulled Darren along, afraid he would go to a showdown with Snape now. No, they also have to catch evidence of Snape's theft. So he quickly said, "Darren, don't listen to Ron's nonsense, this really doesn't have to be done by Snape. Maybe he'll just tell me the way you said it and then give me the spell." "Oops, Ron, why are you stepping on me?" Harry said this with disgust. Anyway, he felt that Snape would never be able to give him a spell in his life. But he had to appease Darren. Otherwise, Darren is too simple, always going straight to the point. Hearing that Snape is in danger, he goes to question Snape, how come he doesn't have a little plan? Forget it, if Darren becomes scheming, he still has to suspect that Darren has been pretended. We suspect that on Halloween Eve, he wants to pass by. Ron was telling Hagrid about Snape when he heard Harry say this and stomped on Harry. However, Harry immediately gave him a look to go back and explain, which made him give up the idea of arguing with Harry now. "Don't talk nonsense, Professor Snape won't steal it at all. He was also involved in the caretaker program, he wanted it, he took it long ago." Hagrid shares the same opinion as Darren. "Listen, what Lu Wei is guarding is not something you worry about. A bunch of kids, what are you doing? You can't be like Darren, obedient and not troublesome? Hagrid looked at Darren approvingly. Or Darren is the most well-behaved and the most carefree. Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at Hagrid somewhat dazedly. What is Darren's most worry-free? Yes, Darren is the kindest and simplest. But he was absolutely unaware. He was no worse off than they were. It's just that Darren is doing good. By the way, what is Lou? Harry asked. Lou is a big dog with 3 heads, and it was my little cutie, and Dumbledore borrowed it as a guard. Hagrid answered honestly. He thought it was over, but Harry pulled out their next question. Guard what? This is a matter for Dumbledore and Mr. Nicolima, and it has nothing to do with you. There's a Nicole Flamel. Hagrid got a little angry. He refused to tell Harry anything more about them, and threw them out of the hut in a fit of rage. After leaving the hut, Harry swore and said, so, Snape is sure. Okay well, Darren, don't look at me like that, I'm just assuming there's such a bad guy in school. His purpose, then, must have been to get what Dumbledore and Nicholme had left there. Now the question is, who do you know who Nicholme is? Episode 84 Homelessness. Christmas is coming. It was snowing at the castle. It was covered with layers of thick snow. Darren sees the Weasley brothers chasing Professor Quirrell on the back of the head and throwing snowballs. This worries him a little. Fearing that Mr. Voldemort would suddenly burst out, Awada took out everyone present. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, the temporary task is now released. Stop the Weasley brothers from chasing Quirrell and reprimand them for disrespecting the professor. Ding, after the mission is completed, get the dark magic talent +2, will the host receive the task? Darren was a little reluctant to take on the task. It's not that you don't want to move, it's that you simply don't want the reward. After this period of hard work, he now has a talent of close to 58 points of black magic. He suspected that he was on his way to Azkaban. But in the end it is the reward. He decided to accept it anyway. Coupled with seeing but not caring, it is easy to collapse people. Access. Darren took a deep breath, and the expression on his face changed from a smile that lamented nature's magic to a serious one. Somewhat angrily, he walked up to the Weasley brothers and said in a serious tone, "What are you doing? How can you bully professors? Professor Quirrell gave us a hard lecture, how can you hit him with a snowball? Child, smash him in anger, what if he ignores the plot and takes you Avada?" Ding, congratulations to the host for getting the dark magic talent +2, Darren pinched his nose and recognized the reward. So he looked even angrier. The great Darren Porter has arrived, and you all have to get out of the way. Your Royal Highness the brother of Harry Potter. The Weasley brothers ran away jokingly. However, as soon as they ran away, they saw Professor McGonagall, with an extremely serious face. Confinement. Weasley. Gryffindor buckle 20 points. Professor McGonagall was too angry. These 2 bear children dared to move the soil on the professor's head. Was it one day that the 2 of them would dare to do something to her? Professor. The Weasley brothers said in disbelief. This is a deduction of points for your own college. One man 20. Yes, I'm deducting points for my own college, and I hope you don't let me deduct more, Professor McGonagall said angrily. The Weasley brothers were scolded by her and left in mourning. Only then did she smile at Darren. Good boy, didn't you get scared? How did this child not get assigned to Gryffindor? Sorting Hat brain has. There is a problem with the practice. No, thank you Professor McGonagall. Darren scratched his hair in embarrassment. The wisps of stupid hair on the top of his head were more cocked by him. Professor McGonagall couldn't help but laugh. In order not to laugh indecently in front of the students, she hurriedly strode away. Darren sighed, he hadn't had time to brush Professor McGonagall's father value yet. He turned around and saw that Professor Quirrell was gone. But when he went to the castle, he always felt that someone was staring at him, but fortunately when he entered the castle, the sight disappeared. It's just that Darren still doesn't feel very comfortable. Because it's still cold inside the castle. He is a northerner in reality, with heating in winter and air conditioning in summer, and he has never felt too sad about his days. Who knew that after crossing over, I felt a cold shiver in the wizarding world. His clothes were thick and he was scarfed, but he still felt as if he were in the winter snow. Especially when taking potions class. He was so cold that he didn't even want to take out his hands. Potions class was underground, and it was wet, and Snape wouldn't even let the fireplace go. Say something for fear of affecting the potion effect. So let people freeze to death? Every time Darren went to potions class, he wanted to stuff himself into the pot. He felt that it would be very comfortable to take a bath in the crucible. Now everyone is cold and can't wait for the holiday. I really feel sorry for some people who have to stay in school even on vacation. During a potions class, Malfoy taunted Harry. Because he saw Harry sign the school book. He had been silent for a long time because Harry Potter was not his brother, and then he was resurrected with blood. But as soon as he finished speaking, Pansy poked him in the back, signaling him to look at Darren. "Draco, he's poor enough," Pansy whispered. Malfoy looked down at Pansy's finger and saw that Darren was obviously in a much worse mood because of his words. He was boiling the potion at this time, but his eye circles were slightly red. This. Well, he remembered, Darren was also a homeless person. He was ostensibly Harry Potter's younger brother, and Harry Potter had no home, and neither did he. Malfoy hesitated. He didn't initially classify Darren as part of Potter. He wanted to say that Harry Potter didn't have a home, but Darren was Malfoy's. But he immediately remembered that his father said he didn't recognize Darren. "Can't you always make me admit my mistake?" Malfoy said awkwardly. He glared at Harry Potter. "Your brother is sad, you are still boiling potions, it is really incompetent." Harry had no idea Malfoy was, because Darren was glaring at him. He also thought Malfoy was constantly bothering him, because he had caught the golden snitch the last time. But he was not at all sad, because of Malfoy's words. He was reluctant to return to Uncle Vernon's house. He was certainly very happy to spend Christmas in school, and it was the most comfortable holiday he had ever had. After all, there was Darren with him. And Ron's parents were going to see Charlie in Romania, so he had to stay here too. Having a younger brother, having friends, eating and drinking, and being able to play freely, Harry didn't find that sad. He laughed happily. Because of his big heart, after the potions class, Malfoy went up to provoke him and mocked him for being a scar. Before leaving, he looked at Ron with contempt and said that he was a poor ghost, and that he was begging for food after Harry. Angry Ron almost hit him. The results were also seen by Snape. Obviously, Gryffindor was deducted 20 points. Episode 85 Piles of Gifts. "I'm going to teach him a hard lesson in the future, I swear." After being deducted points by Snape, Ron was furious and pointed to Malfoy's back, eager to pounce on Malfoy's face now. "Teach whom?" Hagrid came from behind them, carrying a fir tree on his back. "This is for Christmas." "Malfoy and Snape, I hate both of them." Harry gritted his teeth. "Huh? What about Darren and Hermione?" Hagrid looked behind them and asked. If Darren had been there, Snape might not have deducted points for them. "As soon as they get out of class, they go to the library." Harry hastened to explain. "Library? They are so hardworking." No, they went looking for Nicoleem, and we didn't find Nicoleem for a long time. Turning over nearly 100 books without results. "Hagrid, do you want to prompt us?" Harry hurried to please. Hagrid was immediately far away from him. "Stop it. I won't tell you, and don't get involved in this." "Well, then we'll find it ourselves." Ron angrily dragged Harry toward the library. They have read many books during this time. Put modern history of the wizarding world, the great wizards of the 21st century, famous people of modern times, research on the development of the modern wizarding world. I read it all. But it was as if there were no Nicole May in the world. Is he an ordinary person? Shouldn't it be? How could someone who had a relationship with Dumbledore be an ordinary person? Of course, they didn't actually read all the books once, after all, there were too many. The books in Hogwarts are as vast as the sea. Even the name may be in the forbidden area. That's not something they can see. Darren sat in the library, obediently listening to Hermione's words and rummaging through the books to find someone. He certainly knew who Nicole May was. But he just wouldn't tell them. What if this was Dumbledore's script? And he hadn't touched Nicole May's name, and he hadn't even gotten a chocolate frog yet. If he knew it, it would be too abrupt. Finally, after some time, Hermione finally shook her head regretfully. She called them all together and said, "It seems that you can only come back from the holidays to find them again, and when you are in school, you can also open the library more. In case anything is gained, immediately the owl tells me." "No problem." Ron nodded, and he even said, "You can also ask your parents, just don't know if it's safe." "Of course it's safe, they're all muggles, the news doesn't get to Hogwarts." Hermione rolled her eyes. Then she hugged Darren with some sadness, and said softly, "I'm going home, don't be bullied in school." "How is that possible?" "Darren has us here." Harry patted himself on the chest. Ron hurried to make sure he did. Then one of the two of them got Hermione a blank eye. "Well, if you don't object, then I'll leave and see you at school." Hermione let go of Darren and turned away. Looking at the back seems to be a little angry. What's wrong? How did she get angry? And she hugged Darren. Why didn't she hug us? Is it because we did something wrong? Ron asked Harry doubtfully. Harry shook his head, his attention now focused on the holiday. But he said in agreement, yes, there is no way to hug us." "Okay, Darren, don't look at it, let's go play wizard chess, before Christmas." Darren played with Harry and Ron until late before returning to sleep. In his sleep, he always felt like he had become a turtle. Walk the earth. I was breathless with every step. Finally, he woke up tired. He wiped a handful of sweat from his head, and then his eyes widened in shock. His bed was piled with gifts. The gift overwhelmed his entire body. And there are still some on the ground. No wonder he felt out of breath. Who gave this? Darren quickly sat up and looked over his gift. He received more than 100 gifts. Most of it was candy. And it was all sent by the girls. Darren is a little suspicious of his own personality. Can't he seem to like candy so much? The rest of the gifts are normal. Paggy gave him a 10% stake in the Firebolt branch of the light wheel company that was being developed. It is said that Paggy bought it with 3,000 gallons. It was given to him by the ancestors of the Potter family. Professor Flitwick gave him a copy of spell casting tips, Professor McGonagall gave him a copy of the things you don't know about Quidditch, and Harry bought him a pet cat. It is a milky white little cat, and when he sees Darren, he decides to collapse into his arms and sleep. Darren named it Lazy, which means lazy. There were 4 gifts left after that. One was given to him by Snape and was an invisibility cloak. After Darren wore it, he was indeed able to disappear from his body, but once he used the spell of the 10,000 spells, he could find the clues. Apparently not the Potter family's one. Harry Potter received one. Maybe you need one too. I hope you don't use it to do bad things. This. Did the old professor go and see Harry's gifts one by one? After putting the cloak of invisibility away, Darren looked at 3 more gifts. Both were filled with stuff inside and looked bulging. Darren opens one of them. Inside was a thick hand-knitted sweater, and the thick mound made him feel very comfortable. It's a bright green sweater. It also looks perfect for the Slytherin atmosphere. He quickly put the sweater on himself. Only to find that there is also a letter D above. Apparently very clearly woven for him. And there was also a large piece of homemade milk gummy inside the package. Darren tasted a piece and immediately fell in love with the taste. He was anxious to write to Mrs. Weasley, begging her to make him a few more pieces. Also sent with the parcel was a note. Child, I heard Ron say that you, poor baby, expect you to play in the burrow after your vacation. Love your Molly. Episode 86, The Gift Without a Name. Darren put down the fudge that Mrs. Weasley had sent and picked up another bulging bag on the ground. It was sent by Hermione. Inside was a particularly heavy scarf, a pair of gloves, and a bag of chocolate frogs on the innermost. Darren doubted he could do a wholesale candy business. He looked underground. One last gift remaining. Darren opened the gift. It wasn't written who sent it, there was only one book in it. The Use of Dark Arts, this. Who sent this? Dumbledore? Darren opened the book, which told a lot of horrible black magic. Some can tear people apart into pieces, some can turn people into blood and water and then evaporate in the air, and some can detonate the air around them. Darren felt that there were still a lot of killing methods in this magic world. Who says Avadisol is the most evil? That's evil, okay. He looked at the book again. It also spells out the steps to cast the spell. With Darren's talent for black magic. He just watched it once and felt that he had learned it completely. Wouldn't that be what Dumbledore had used to test him? Darren held the book's hand, trembling slightly. He was wondering if it was possible to go to Azkaban and brush the prisoner's Holy Father value. Obviously, it is impossible. Those people may not even lose their humanity, can they still be moved? But he also figured it out. This should not have been Dumbledore's handiwork. Dumbledore was just suspicious and couldn't have given him such a thing. So the person who gave him this thing should be Voldemort. Depend on. How cruel. What does this product really mean? And Voldemort gave him this thing, did Dumbledore know? No, turn it in. Darren hurriedly put on his clothes, flipped through the book quickly, and rushed to Dumbledore's classroom. He promises. He must be politically correct. At best, it is to learn and protect yourself. Coming to the 2 ugly stone statues, Darren tried all the Dumbledore passwords he had seen in the original book, and then passed them here at the honey candy. Huh? Child, shouldn't you be unpacking your own gifts at this time? Dumbledore asked doubtfully. Darren hurriedly handed him the book in his hand, and then said, Professor, I don't know who it is, gave it to me in the form of a gift in the morning, I turned it over, and found that it was full of terrible black magic, so I quickly sent it to you. Good boy, don't worry, I know about who sent it, just. Why? Dumbledore opened the book. His blue eyes shone with wisdom. It seemed to be a quick guess who had given it to Darren. It's just that he is also plagued by another problem. That is, why would that person send Darren such a book? Was it to guide Darren down that path? Or did that person also discover a similar experience with Darren? His face was not good. But he still squeezed out a smile and said, "Don't be afraid of children, this man gave you this book for the purpose. I think I already know, he may be trying to lead you astray, to the path of eternal life that he thinks." Phoenix? Darren recalled. There seems to be no mention of the Horcrux in it. Can this be called immortality yesterday? But when he thought of his Holy Father, of course, Dumbledore believed whatever he said. So he just tilted his head and asked curiously, "After death, can't people live forever?" Dumbledore was dumbfounded. He helplessly rubbed his forehead and explained to him, "My child, that is called long death, not eternal life. Eternal life means long life. That's not interesting." Darren skimmed his lips. He was indeed interested in this world after the death of the wizarding world. After Sirius' death, Harry once asked Gryffindor's ghost, Nick. Nick said that wizards can choose to come back to life. But few wizards choose this path. Then it means that there is an unknown path after the wizard dies. Maybe he can actually go and see it. Of course, that's all later. Now he still wants to live well. So he scratched his hair in embarrassment, revealed a bit of a well-behaved smile, and said, "That's the way it is, but I'm still young. Not interested in these." Yes, he misread one thing, and that is that you are still a child. Dumbledore leaned back in his chair. Then he smiled more kindly. "Child, don't take this matter to heart, go and enjoy your Christmas to the fullest. This time, Harry should also wake up." "All right, Professor Dumbledore, goodbye. Merry Christmas." Ding, Father plus 80. "Oh, my child, so do you, Merry Christmas," Dumbledore said with a smile. As Darren walked from the headmaster's office to Gryffindor, he found Harry already looking for him. "Darren, where did you go?" "Oh my god, this sweater is awesome to wear on you." Ron looked puzzled as he wrapped himself in a sweater, and also wrapped himself in a thick scarf with a pair of wool gloves to wrap his own handbag of the sturdy Darren. "Don't quite understand where this stick is?" So he asked. Of course Darren knows how to protect himself, how great is that? Harry, who looked like my brother growing up, disgusted Ron slightly. A little jealous though. Because his brother only knew how to laugh at him. He had a birthday when he was a child and turned the doll he gave him into a spider. It became his childhood dream. Of course, he felt that he couldn't have been as sweet as Darren. The thought of him standing up and calling out to Fred and brother George, Ron almost threw up. "Darren, did you see the cat I bought for you?" Harry looked at Darren with a smile. Darren touched it in his arms and a cute milky white cat appeared on his hand. "It's called Lizzie." "Lizzie?" "It's a lady." Harry touched Lizzie's cat head in shock. Lizzie rolled over and continued to sleep in the palm of Darren's hand. Well, he suddenly felt that the name was quite appropriate. Episode 87 Death Invisibility Cloak. Harry approached Darren to show off their father's invisibility cloak. "This was given to me this morning, Darren, and I want to give it to you," Harry said seriously. He held up his invisibility cloak and looked sincere. "This is Daddy's relic, and I thought about it and should give it to you. Although the person who gave me the invisibility cloak left a note telling me that I must put the invisibility cloak away. But after thinking about it for a long time, I still felt that I couldn't selfishly leave this invisibility cloak. My brother was a brother, and I lived with my parents for a year when I was a child, but Darren, you should not even hear their voices. If the cloak of invisibility were handed over to me, it would obviously be unfair to you." He pushed the cloak of invisibility toward Darren. His face was full of the poise of being a brother. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, the temporary task is now released. Stroke the cloak of invisibility with a loving expression, then push it back to Harry when he thinks you're going to accept it. And said, "Brother, I know what you mean, but I still think you need it more. You and Ron always swim at night, and with the cloak of invisibility, I don't have to worry about you being discovered." Ding, the mission is successful. Get the invisibility cloak of death. Does the host receive the task? Pick up. Of course, I took on this task. You must know that the Potter family's invisibility cloak is described in the original book as the Three Hallows of Death. It is said that by collecting the three sacred artifacts, the dead can be resurrected. Although the original book finally states that Ji-Chi cannot resurrect the dead at all, but will only bravely face death. But obviously, the effect is very good. I just don't know what the system gives the invisibility cloak of the god of death is for. At this thought, Darren immediately became excited. He blinked, then carefully took the invisibility cloak in Harry's arms. He felt that just as he had taken the invisibility cloak, a glance was on him. But he had no worries. It's like not being aware at all. Carefully and lovingly touching the invisibility cloak, he said softly, "I really want to see how Daddy looks with this invisibility cloak." His eyes were a little red. Harry wanted to comfort him, but he didn't know how to comfort him, and he hadn't seen Mom and Dad. Just when he was a little sad, he saw that Darren suddenly pushed the invisibility cloak back again. "Darren," I said, "I don't need to." Harry pushed aside the cloak of invisibility, trying not to let himself see it. "No, brother, listen to me, this cloak of invisibility is in your place. Yes, he represents what Daddy used to use, but you're Daddy's son too, and you can't let me go, because you're 20 minutes older than me. And you always sneak around at night with Ron. Don't look at me like this, I haven't heard you say it, but I can guess it. If the cloak of invisibility is placed in your place, I will also feel much more at ease, and then I don't have to worry about which professor you are arrested and imprisoned, Darren said with a smile. He placed the cloak of invisibility in Harry's arms. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining Death's invisibility cloak. Death's invisibility cloak, an invisibility cloak worn by a Grim Reaper, and when worn, it can hide even the sound and breath. Note, it will not be detected by any spells and abilities, including the magic eye. This is good, this is good. He remembered Harry's piece and couldn't hide the sound. Snape almost caught him by doing this. And it will be pierced by Moody's magic eyes. Later, the Ministry of Magic installed Moody's magic eye on the office door to protect Harry. But I'll talk about that later. Darren looked at Harry. Harry was a little embarrassed by what he said, and he felt his throat choked a little. So he cleared his throat and said loudly, "Little brother, isn't it? How could I possibly be caught?" After playing for an afternoon, they slowly came to the auditorium. It looks very lively here. Large plates of turkey. Large plate of small sausages. There are also mountains of grilled meats. Butter peas. Baked potatoes. Almost all the food types in England were piled up. What intrigued Darren the most was the pile of wizarding firecrackers on the table. Darren saw Harry and Fred arrow one. The firecrackers made a loud popping sound, and inside it blew up an admiral's hat and a few guinea pigs. Seeing that he was interested, Dumbledore, who was next to him, took a cannonball and handed it to him. Darren pulled tentatively. A puff of green smoke flooded him. Then a new set of wizarding chess pieces appeared. Ron next to him even pulled up with envy. His set of wizarding chess pieces was very worn out, and it was handed down by his grandfather. Wait until the end of the banquet. They left contentedly with a large pile of small toys blown out of the firecrackers, and when Darren went out, he was still lamenting that the wizarding world was so funny. And by the time he was ready to return to the Slytherin lounge, he was pulled alone by Harry. "I want to go on a night tour tonight, the first use of this cloak of invisibility, and I want to be with you," Harry said seriously. Darren dotted 900 heads. He remembered that Harry had seen the Mirror of Eris this time. Don't know what he'll see in the mirror? At night, Darren sneaks out of Slytherin house. Of course, he also wore the invisibility cloak that Snape had given him. Although he wanted to try his death invisibility cloak, it was clear that on this night trip, Dumbledore would most likely follow, guiding Harry to the Mirror of Eris. He put on Death's invisibility cloak and would let Dumbledore find out that something was wrong. Darren sneaked quietly to the meeting place where they were discussing. It's empty here. But he seemed to be able to hear the sound of breathing, so he called out to Harry softly. Sure enough, ripples appeared in the air, and Harry emerged from head to toe. Oh my God, Darren, you too have an invisibility cloak? Yes, Professor Snape gave it to me. Darren handed Harry the cloak of invisibility. Harry was startled, and he even thought that the Darren in front of him was disguised by Snape. Maybe it was he talking to Darren that Snape overheard him, so he threatened Darren, or killed him, disguised as him coming here. Say, where did you get Darren? Harry jerked his wand and looked angrily at Darren. Darren? Where did I get myself? Episode 88. The Snape sends. It took Darren a while to make Harry understand that he wasn't Snape, that he didn't think much of himself, that he was very good. How is that possible? Can Snape be so kind? Harry couldn't figure out why Snape would give Darren the invisibility cloak. Could it be that Snape was disguised? That man locked up Snape or killed him? He thought happily. I would like to realize this wish immediately. The expression on his face was too obvious for Darren to see. So he shook his head disapprovingly, looked at Harry and said sincerely, "Brother, you can't be so prejudiced against the professor is very good and conscientious. We still have to face the troubles of our children every day, and he is now just a little bit of a tantrum, and he is already very gentle. Ding, father plus 80, ding, father plus 60, ding, father plus 30. There were only 2 people present, but 3 prompts came out. Leaving Darren himself behind, it was clear that there were currently 2 invisible men following him and Harry. Darren was a little speechless. Guide Harry to find the Mirror of Eris, 2 people need to be dispatched? That's a bit too grand, isn't it? But think about it, according to the original book, it was Snape's night shift. Harry ran to the forbidden area to read a book, was discovered, and was chased by Snape. Until he hid in a room and saw the magic Mirror of Eris. That's when Snape heard Harry's footsteps and knew that Harry had an invisibility cloak. Even a wizard like him should have been able to hear Harry's breathing, and it was impossible not to find Harry's presence. And the original is not found. It's clear that either Snape doesn't want to catch it, or it's the plot. And judging by the number of Holy Father prompts that Darren was seeing now, Snape probably didn't want to be caught, just to scare Harry. It is estimated that Snape imagined Harry's panicked face under the cloak of invisibility, and his mood could stretch a lot. Bullying James's son, Snape is afraid that the office is more efficient. But these were all Dumbledore's business, and they had little to do with him. So he looked questioningly at Harry, who was thinking about Snape giving him the invisibility cloak, and asked, "Brother, where are you going to go so late? Or we'll just go back in a circle, right? Such a late-night tour will increase the workload of the teacher." Ding, father plus 80, ding, father plus 70, only 2 sounds came. Obviously, neither of these sounds should have been Harry's. Because he was looking at Darren helplessly. "Oh, Darren, relax, don't be afraid, now that it's out, let's have fun. I tell you, we can go to the Forbidden Book area and check Nicole Flamel's name, maybe when Hermione returns, we'll find out." Harry patted Darren on the shoulder and, without waiting for him to answer, dragged him toward the library. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, and Darren was a little speechless. Worthy of being the Lion of Gryffindor, this is also too unscrupulous, right? Sure enough, before Darren could stop them, they heard Filch's voice. "It must be around here, I heard footsteps." Harry was startled and stood in a panic. And he found that because of the run, he also lost track of Darren. "I don't know where he went, will he be caught by Filch?" Thinking of Dalen being held in captivity by Filch, Harry felt his stomach bulge faintly. Darren will be very sad when the time comes. As he thought this, the bravery factor in his body boiled over. Why not let him lure Filch away so he wouldn't be able to catch Dalen? However, before he could do so, he suddenly found that Lady Lolith was screaming at where he was, and Filch sensed something was wrong. His body was already standing in front of Harry. There was only a layer of invisibility cloak between them. Harry could even see Filch's horrible face, with a cruel smile on it. He felt his body trembling. Darren, next to him, was also thinking about whether to lure Fishy away. There was no Harry in the original book, who had just run excitedly into the corridor and was only found in the library. And now, the plot is ahead of schedule. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, the temporary task is now released. Remove the cloak of invisibility, then rush behind Filch and make a look like you want to scream to scare him. But immediately shook his head, only gently patted his body, then turned and ran. Ding, after the mission is successful, get the animal affinity talent +2, will the host receive the task? Access. Darren sighed, it was clear that Harry had been discovered by Lady Lorith. It was a matter of time before Filch found Harry and unveiled his invisibility cloak, and he could even faintly hear Harry's tense and rapid breathing. This poor child. Darren was thinking when he saw Mrs. Lorith glance at him again. All right. Mrs. Lorith also spotted him. However, because of his high animal affinity talent, he was spared. But watching Harry get caught didn't fit his personality. It is better that he quickly lead Filch away and let the plot continue. So Darren immediately unveiled the cloak of invisibility and crept up behind Filch. He opened his mouth, intending to follow Fred's example and scream at other people's ears to scare people. But he quickly shook his head, obviously not thinking that it was a good idea. So he stepped forward and quietly patted Filch's body. Who? Filch was obviously startled. And Darren was also shocked, his face turned white, and he seemed to subconsciously want to obediently listen to Filch's words. But he immediately remembered that it was a night tour, and that he had to save Harry, so he ran away to lure Filch out. There are students running around in the hallway. Filch cried out loudly. Tried to call the teacher on duty at night. I said that the previous regulations should be activated, and these little cubs who travel at night should be locked up in small black houses, and they must be given a long memory. Episode 89, The Magic Mirror of Eris. Filch ran away, and Harry breathed a fierce sigh of relief. It's just that he's also a bit depressed. Obviously he said well, he went to protect Darren, and it turned out that Darren protected him. And he didn't even know if Darren was caught by Filch now. If he caught, he felt embarrassed to say he was Darren in the future. Harry stood there in frustration. She glanced at Mrs. Loris, who was still meowing at him, and kicked it irritably. Enough, are you still calling it over? Why can't you doze off all day like Lizzie? Meow. Harry's kick had obviously made Lady Loris very angry, and it screamed loudly and guarded Harry tightly, almost like an enforcer catching a thief. Oh my God. I was wrong, don't you bark. Harry was startled, and he seemed to have heard the footsteps of Mr. Filch rushing over. Sir, right here, I thought there was something wrong here, but a student suddenly appeared and startled me, and I ran after him. As a result, now Mrs. Lolith called out so, and it was clear that the infiltrator had not yet run. I think an invisible infiltrator is naturally more important than a student. Oh yes, Filch, you did the right thing, maybe it's a terrible asshole inside, and you did a great deed. Harry was stunned. He swore that he heard Snape's mocking voice. There seemed to be a cold smile. It's almost like telling him I'm going to catch you. Run. Harry immediately ran away from where he was. He might be able to hide from Filch, but he certainly couldn't hide from Snape. Snape is like an old dog that can smell him and get him out. As he said, hang him upside down in a dark room in the basement and punish him with black magic. Harry, this side. Just as Harry was running around with Snape, he suddenly heard Darren's voice. Then a hand grabbed him and pulled him into the room. Darren? It's me. Darren took off his cloak of invisibility and looked at Harry with some helplessness. He had all lured Filch away, and the guy wasn't running fast enough and was still there kicking the cat, apparently retaliated against by Filch. Thankfully, I finally saw you, but how did you find me? Harry took off his cloak of invisibility in confusion and asked strangely. He couldn't feel Darren, but Darren could feel him? Breathing, footsteps, and you don't have control over your volume at all. Darren sighed. This invisibility cloak is used by Ha, and it is ruined. Harry scratched his hair in embarrassment, trying to break the embarrassment. So he quickly looked around, trying to change the subject. Then he found the set. It was an empty room with clutter all around. Next to the debris, a mirror that clearly did not belong to the room was there. This mirror is very grand, with a golden frame that rises to the ceiling in height, and it is supported by a pair of claw-shaped feet. At the top is engraved a line, Eris Magic Mirror. Harry curiously pulled Darren over. By this time, there were no sounds of Snape and Filch outside. Quietly. He looked in the mirror with reassurance. At first there was nothing in the mirror, but then he noticed a whole bunch of people behind him. Startled, he looked back and saw nothing. What's wrong? Brother? Darren asked doubtfully. Although he knew that Harry should have seen the Potters at this time, as a child who knew nothing, of course he could only be strangely vigilant. There's someone inside. Harry said hurriedly. He noticed a man and a woman standing at the front of the room. The woman was extremely beautiful, with red hair, green eyes, and a face somewhat similar to Darren's. And the man's hair was as messy as his, and his face was more like this man's. He suddenly understood that it was his parents. Darren, come and see, look at our mom and dad, you haven't seen it yet. Harry pulled Darren over and asked him to watch it with him. Darren hesitated for a moment before looking in the mirror. He didn't know what he wanted to see in his heart. What would it be? Ding, perceive the induction of the mind, is it a fake memory? This. This also plays a dir. Forge and let it see what I think. He didn't know if Dumbledore could find anything, or if it would be safer to forge it. And with his memory forged. Inside the mirror, high-rise buildings gradually appeared, and many scenes he faked appeared. So he sighed softly, how beautiful. I see the world of the future, right? When people there are sick, the hospital will see them for free. If someone drops the money, no one will pick it up casually, and even if they do, they will only hand it over to the police. I also saw that everyone didn't even have to lock the door when they went out, because the future world is so beautiful without a thief. Ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 80. This time, there are only 2 father's value reminders. Harry should not have given him father value because he was frowning at Darren. How come? This mirror can't possibly see the future world because I saw mom and dad, who died very early. He shook his head and looked questioningly into the mirror. He had just wanted to see it with Darren, but now he didn't know how to let Darren see it. So he could only try to describe the scene he saw. Darren listened to his story and suddenly asked, is there a man among you who has a grandfather whose knees are as uneven as yours? Yeah. Darren, you see it too? Harry looked up happily, then heard Darren say, yes, I saw mom and dad too, but they both lived in the world I saw. They're doing well, they've also given birth to brothers and sisters, and I love them, Darren said in a pleasant tone, but his eyes gradually became red. He blinked, suppressed the wetness in the corner of his eyes and suddenly said, I miss them so much. Ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100. Episode 90 Darren's Gift. For the next few days, Darren would be dragged by Harry to look in the mirror. He actually didn't want to see it. This thing still has to make up memories not to say, but also to say their own feelings after watching. A troublesome batch. If it were not for the father's comfort to him, he would certainly have rejected the offer. It was Darren's idea that touched Dumbledore. Just as Harry was taking him to the mirror again, Dumbledore arrived. Children, here you are again. Professor Dumbledore. I'm sorry, Darren bowed his head in embarrassment, obviously feeling guilty that he had violated the school rules and had been discovered by the principal. Ding, father plus 50. No need to apologize to the child, anyone who sees the mirror of Eris will make such a move. Dumbledore laughed softly. He winked at Darren. Darren laughed sheepishly. Then he looked at Harry. Harry took a step back. He was also a member of the school violations. Well, children, I'm not here to punish you, I'm just trying to tell you that I'm going to move it away and hide it in a place that no one else can find. Dumbledore said softly. Don't. I. I also want to see Mom and Dad, and I promise, I won't come back at night in the future. Before Darren could speak, Harry was already shouting eagerly. Dumbledore did not speak, and he looked at Darren, as if to hear his opinion. Darren smiled bitterly and said in Harry's anxious gaze, Professor, you were right. At first I was really addicted to this mirror, and I thought it would allow me to see the future, or see another world. But the more I looked at it, the more I suddenly understood that it wasn't true, it was just a fantasy in my heart. I think Mom and Dad would live in a world like that, so they'd be there. I think my brother and I had younger siblings, and then we really had. It's fake. I miss them, but I don't escape from reality. My brother has been bringing me over every day these days, and I wanted to tell him. But I also think that maybe it would be better not to tell him, and these facts, maybe it would be better to tell him later? I'm sorry, brother, I just want you to be happy for a few more days. Don't be like me, suddenly understand the meaning of this mirror, and then you can't sit happily in front of the mirror, Darren said as he suddenly turned his head and wiped his eyes. Harry realized that his green eyes were already red. Those green eyes, like his mother, were full of sorrow at this time. Ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, well. Apparently these words moved Dumbledore and Harry unclearly. He also explained why he hadn't actively looked in the mirror with Harry these 2 days. In fact, he thought it was stupid to look in the mirror. Every time he looked in the mirror, he would be prompted to take the mind and make him falsify the memory. If he does not forge memories, he can only see himself in the mirror. I saw the sad expression I had pretended. It's embarrassing. Luckily, no one knows. Child, I'm glad you were so sober. That's right, this mirror can only see what you want to see. The happiest people in the world can only see themselves inside. Well, so late, why don't you two put on the invisibility cloak and go back to sleep? Dumbledore asked with a smile. Harry could only stand up and ask curiously, then Professor Dumbledore, what can you see in it? Socks. I saw myself standing there with a pair of woolen socks. Christmas comes and goes, and no one ever remembers to send me socks, they just send me books, Dumbledore said regretfully. Darren quietly rolled his eyes. What about the deception? Harry didn't believe that. But he still showed a simple look and said seriously, I'm sorry, Mr. Dumbledore, I thought you liked candy, that's why I gave you a bunch of candy for Christmas, and I will definitely send you wool socks next year. Ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 50. Darren, who had harvested a bunch of father values again, was quickly pulled away by Harry. Such a simple Darren, how can he protect him? After Eris's mirror had been taken away by Dumbledore, Harry remembered to tell Ron about it. Ron was a little angry, you should invite me and see what I have in mind. However, when he learned that Harry looked at the mirror and was stunned, he immediately felt that it was better that the mirror had been removed. Hermione also returned from outside the school. She blushed and thanked Darren for giving her the silver necklace. It was a star diamond style necklace that looked very beautiful. Oh, no thanks, it was purchased by Pashi, and it is said to be popular in the Muggle world, and it bought a diamond mine and made a box for me and Darren to give away. Harry said casually. Then he got Hermione's angry look at him wanting to kill. Ahem. Hermione snorted hard at Harry, then turned and ran to the girls' dormitory. She was a little afraid to look into Darren's eyes. Where to go? Pack my stuff and report it to you if I have to report it. Hermione's unhappy voice came from upstairs, sounding almost angry. What's wrong? She's angry at that necklace? It was really Paggy who gave it. Harry scratched his hair in confusion, and finally could only sigh that the girls were always angry. Even Hermione was just like a normal girl. Darren twitched the corners of his mouth. He was now glad he hadn't entered Gryffindor, or the fact that he had prepared a necklace for every girl he knew this time would have been exposed by Harry. Thankfully, Slytherin girls don't talk about gifts so openly. They will only be shy to thank you, and will not mention what the gift is, and others will not ask more. It wouldn't be as mouthful of debunking as Harry. Forget it, who made Harry his big brother? And he is now young, simple ignorance is normal, no girl will be willing to be angry with him. Episode 91 found Nicole May. After school started, Darren and the others began their search for Nicole May in the library. Although they have not reported any expectations. But a little bit of fantasy, maybe the next second will be able to get the news of this person. Maybe they would know that Dumbledore was hiding something in the room at the end of the corridor on the 4th floor. But things are not good. No progress. Even would brought Harry a sad piece of news. The next Quidditch game will be with Snape as a referee. Harry almost cried. He felt that Snape wanted his life. Last time he wanted my life. Yes and yes, Darren, you're right, it's not necessarily Snape who wants my life. But now that he's going to be a referee, he really wants my life, and if Quidditch can't win, what's the difference between that and being dead? Harry almost cried when he told Darren the news about them. It may have been that he was too loud, and he was tragically thrown out by Mrs. Pins. Fortunately, Darren and they went out with him, which made Harry look less pitiful. It's okay, actually, you look at Professor Snape fiercely, but the professor is very good. As long as you don't mess with him and avoid him, there is no problem. Really, I'm not lying to you. As Darren continued to comfort Harry, he saw Malfoy standing in the library doorway and pointing his wand at Neville. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary task, go to Neville, point your wand at Malfoy, and angrily say Malfoy, you bully Neville again, I will tell Professor Snape. Ding, after the mission is completed, get Neville's herb class talent, will the host receive the task? Pick up. Darren immediately stepped forward. He quickly walked over to Malfoy, blocked Neville behind him, and said angrily, Malfoy, why do you always bully Neville? If you bully him again, I'll tell Professor Snape and ask him to lock you up. His expression was very serious, it looked like he was going to cast a curse on Malfoy, but the words he said made people laugh kindly. The most vicious method in this child's mind was confinement? Ding, congratulations to the host mission, get Neville's herb class talent. Neville's herb class talent, after use, the herb class talent is plus 15. Hey? He who, is the talent of the Neville herbal medicine class already so high? Although from the original book, Darren knew that Neville was very suitable for herbal medicine class, but he really did not expect that at this time, Neville's talent for herbal medicine class had reached 15. Neville never performed too well in herbal medicine class, which led Darren to always think that Neville's herbal class talent was 10 at most. Well, maybe when school started, Neville's herbal class talent was 10, and now it's 15. His previous herb class talent was 3, which he used to increase to 10 talent points, plus Neville's 15 talents, and he now has 25 talent points. Obviously, in the 2nd grade, his talent for herbal medicine is also genius level. He thought excitedly. Then I saw that Malfoy's face was distorted. This guy looked at his expression like he's a bully scumbag. He tilted his head in confusion. I saw Malfoy angrily take Crabbe and Gower away. Before leaving, they also viciously shouted at Neville, saying that they must clean him up. It's over, Malfoy should hate me. Neville said in tears. He looked at Malfoy's expression like he were looking at another demon. Neville, you have to be brave. Hermione angrily walked over and cheered Neville on. She had never imagined that there were people in the wizarding world who specialized in bullying others. Neville, show your courage and knock him down. Ron was on the side to give Neville advice. Neville shook his head, and he said sadly, I don't have the courage at all, I don't know how I got sorted into Gryffindor, in fact, I think Hufflepuff is a better fit for me. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary task, comfort Neville and make him happy. Ding, after the mission is completed, get the animal affinity talent plus 2, will the host receive the task? Hey? It's animal affinity talent again. Darren was slightly curious. Still, I clicked on it right away. He walked over to Neville, pulled a piece of chocolate frog out of his pocket, and stuffed it into Neville's hand. He said seriously, Neville, when Malfoy bullied a Hufflepuff student the other day, it was you who stepped forward. Even if you are afraid, you are still in front of that classmate, which makes Malfoy bully you every day during this time. So, how can you say that you don't have courage? Neville, you are a hero like your brother. Neville blushed. It was the first time he had been praised like this. It was Grandma, who liked to say he was too stupid, lacked courage, and cowardly. Darren told him that he had been very heroic and a hero, just like Harry Potter. I just don't want to see him bully. Neville stuttered. But Darren had already put his hand on his shoulder, and he said excitedly, I understand, but this can't hide your courage. Come, eat this chocolate frog, you will definitely become more courageous. Ding, congratulations to the host for completing the mission and gaining the animal affinity talent, plus 21. Neville looked much happier. He picked up the chocolate frog plug in his mouth. Feeling the jump in his mouth, he squinted his eyes happily. Cards, Dumbledore's. I don't know if Darren have you collected these cards, Dumbledore's I've got several. Neville handed the card to Darren. Happy to leave here. I've got a lot of Dumbledore's cards, too many, so suggest Darren you still lost them. Ron skimmed his lips and didn't like Dumbledoreka very much. He prefers to put together a full set of celebrity cards. Anyway, I like Professor Dumbledore. Hey? Ron luckily didn't listen to you. I think I found Nicole Ream. Episode 92 Brother believes in you. Nicole Flamel is here. The four of them found a classroom where no one was there and discussed it quietly. Hermione seemed to think of something at once, and she hurriedly said, I know where I seem to have read it. It turned out to be the book Hogwarts, A School History. Last time Darren had said he was going to see the book, I said I had seen it, so let him not waste time. Well, Darren, you are really right about everything. Hermione looked at Darren in admiration. Darren shook his head in embarrassment. I just talked about it, and I didn't look at it in the end. I misled you, or we would have found it long ago, and after wasting so long, I feel that Darren, you are tired and thin. Hermione said bitterly. Ron next to him was a little upset, and he interrupted Hermione. What is Darren tired and thin? Obviously, everyone is looking up books together. Why don't you say that we are tired and thin? Yeah, how can Darren be so tired? I keep an eye on Darren every day. He was hungry and thin, and 2 days ago, I found out that he seemed to be a little more round than before, and now he was back again. I found out that he had sweets these days, so he would be thin, Harry said unhappily. He found out that Darren seemed to be a little fat, and within 2 days, he was hungry again. No, I'm the same as before. Darren hastened to deny Harry's suspicions. Some time ago, he ate too much and gained some weight. One day I looked in the mirror and found that I had quickly reduced the amount of food to restore my weight. He didn't want to eat into a little fat mound and then go and reap the father's value. He couldn't imagine that picture. Well, don't say it, Darren said there is no such thing. Hermione waved away Harry and Ron impatiently. She rushed back to the dormitory, then took out an extremely heavy book. A beep slammed on the table. It reverberates with a huge bang. This book has been in my dorm room, and I didn't even think about flipping through it. Hermione said again with chagrin. She turned the book to a page, pointed to the words on it, and read, Nicole May is the maker of the Philosopher's Stone. She mysteriously lowered the word Philosopher's Stone. It's just that neither Harry nor Ron quite understood why they were doing it. What's that? Sounds like a stone. The two asked curiously, get 2 wide eyes from Hermione. The Philosopher's Stone, which can turn metal into gold, and crafting the elixir Nicole May celebrated its 665th birthday last year. Hermione took a deep breath as she looked at Ron and Harry and said with disdain, got it, turn into gold? Didn't I become the richest person? If you get it, I and the golden Garen in the Darren vault won't have to save it anymore? Harry and Ron said excitedly. The two of them didn't care about the elixir of life. They hadn't thought about that yet, they were thinking more about the philosopher's ability to turn gold into gold. As long as there is a magic stone, they will become the richest man in no time. Hermione was speechless. She could only look at Darren. Darren smiled deftly and purely. But I was excited. In other words, the ability of this magic stone to make gold seems to be really powerful. If he could make gold, would he still use it so frugally? Cough, though it doesn't seem to have lost him. But the feeling of sitting on the mountain and eating the sky is indeed a little scary. So, since Nicole May is going to destroy the Philosopher's Stone, can you give it to him? Darren was a little itchy in his heart, but on the surface he still had a simple happy look and said, since you have found something, so that everyone can rest well, Hermione is tired of dark circles, and brother and Ron have not slept well, ding, father plus 80, ding, father plus 90, ding, father plus 90. Ron, Hermione, and Harry were touched badly. Hearing Darren say this, it was as if the fatigue of these days had disappeared. Yeah, but you're still tired of Hermione, and it's funny to see Hermione's big dark circles. Ron pointed at Hermione's face and laughed. Darren opened his mouth. Child, you do not understand the mood of the ladies at all, and advise you to be self-sufficient in the next life. Fortunately, Hermione was a measured little witch who did not kill Ron. The Quidditch game is about to start again. They were initially discussing what they were going to do if there was a Philosopher's Stone to do, and then all that was left was Harry lamenting that his life was short. Race this day. Harry felt uncomfortable. Both of his friends were comforting him that he must be fine. But looking at him is like watching him go to the battlefield. Harry felt bitterly that the two of them were not as good as being uneasy, and he felt even more uncomfortable. The only thing that touched him was his brother Darren. Darren had his wand with him. He looked at Harry and said, Brother, don't worry, if anyone really does do something to you, I'll rush to Professor Snape and help him pick up the bad guy, Darren said seriously. Harry shook his head helplessly. He really wanted to say that the person who wanted to do something to him was Snape. He needs to guard against Snape, not anyone else. Darren runs to Snape, fearing that Snape has caught Darren and threatened, but Darren never believed that Snape was a bad guy, so he could only laugh and say, Brother believes in you, but just sit in the stands, and Brother will be fine. Brother is afraid that you will send yourself into the hands of the enemy. As a little father, Darren certainly couldn't understand Harry's subtext, so he nodded happily at Harry. He said he would believe Harry was all right. With Harry's forced happy expression, he returned to SDRY stand. But after sitting down in the stands, he found Malfoy sitting at the front and talking excitedly to Crabbe and Gower. And looking in the direction of their whispering, it was Hermione and Ron who were sitting casually here. No, maybe Neville sat with Ron and Hermione. Looking at Malfoy's expression, it was as if he wanted to teach Neville a lesson. Episode 93, Scene Cards. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, the temporary task is now released. Eavesdropping on Malfoy's conversation, when Malfoy decides to attack Neville, slams his fist into his eye and says, "Malfoy, I hate you more and more, you are a sinister little man." Ding, after the mission is completed, get mana plus 100, will the host receive the task? Hey? Magic rewarded? Darren had previously received 100 mana rewards when he received the starter pack, and he had never rewarded mana since. Didn't expect to show up here. Pick up. After tapping to pick it up, Darren quietly moved his position and sat down behind Malfoy. Malfoy and Crabbe and Gower, three of them not knowing what sinister topics had been said, laughing with ill will. He leaned in and listened. After a while, I went up and provoked that Neville, and then he was sure to be ashamed and angry. When the time comes, I will take out my wand and attack him, and you should remember to divert Darren Porter's eyes and don't let him come and join in the fun. Okay, do you want us to beat that little Potter? Goyle asked excitedly. Malfoy rolled his eyes and said dismissively, "If you hit him, you go, don't be beaten and cry and come to me." Darren Porter's combat power was clear to him. Provoke him and maybe kill someone with one punch. Goyle was terrified and flinched a little, as if thinking of the scene where Darren beat him. Crabbe grinned wildly. Darren skimmed his lips and rolled his eyes. How could such a weak child of his, in the mouths of these three people, be like a troll? It affected the image of his little father too much. No, when punching for a while, you must pay attention to the top and bottom. If you give someone else that he is a reckless man who can only talk with his fists, he is likely to collapse. Darren whispered. Watching Malfoy begin to taunt Neville for being brainless, mocking Neville for being stupid, then Neville had the courage to reply, and he raised his wand as if he were injured. "I must teach you a good lesson today, you hurt me," Malfoy said excitedly, and his wand was aimed at Neville. Apparently, he had already remembered how to bully Neville to be comfortable. It is better to give him a leg to freeze and lock. Let him pounce on the fall. Throwing a dog in front of so many people and eating, this Longbottom is going to cry angrily, right? He laughed as if he had seen such a scene. Who knew the next second, a fist slammed into his eye. Malfoy covered his eyes with a cry. Tears flowed down. He screamed, "Who? Who sneaked up on me?" "It's me," Darren said coldly. Malfoy was stunned, and he almost exploded. Why is Harry Potter protected by Darren, and he is bullied by Darren? Why did you hit me? Believe it or not, I went to tell my dad. Tell your dad? Yes, Malfoy, you are well off, you are still an aristocrat, so you can bully others at will. Neville didn't invite you to mess with you, sitting there, you have to find a way to find things to bully him. How did you become like this? I always thought that you were unforgiving, at best a little naughty, no bad thoughts, and as a result, now you simply made me feel that I didn't know. I hate you more and more, Malfoy, Darren said with a straight face. He lifted his head and looked at Malfoy, who was covering one eye and looking very angry, and continued, "Today, I hit you, and I know that your family is very strong, so you can tell your father as much as you want. Even if he asked me to drop out of school, I would admit it, but you Malfoy is a shameless villain." Ding, congratulations to the host for completing the mission perfectly, getting plus 100 mana, and getting the scene card *1. Scene card, when used, a scene is randomly generated in which the host can project into reality after completing the father's quest. This? What a new thing. What would happen if he used the scene card now? Darren clicked curiously to use. Suddenly, the scene in front of him turned into an alley. Ding, start releasing the scene card mission, Phase 1 mission, Save the Kid. After completing the full stage mission, the scene card can be projected into reality, yes? No rewards? Darren felt a slight loss. This does not give rewards to let you do the task, is a white prostitute, he muttered. Just thinking that it was better to give up the task, I heard a cry in the alley. But the sound disappeared immediately, leaving only the sound of whimpering. Apparently gagged. So the child he wants to save should be this, right? Darren carefully sneaked over and saw a very big man. No, his current height looks like he is 3 or 4 years old. About the same age as the girl holding in the man's arms. The girl had a beautiful pale golden head and blue-gray eyes. His body was scarred and his cute face was dirty. The look was a bit wooden, but when he found Darren approaching, he was a little mocking. Well, whoever it is. It is impossible for him to see death without saving. So Darren began to be silent. It was like a small cannonball hitting a man. The man screamed in pain and there was no sound. Darren almost scolded a rookie. Wasted his 1,000 father's values. Let's go, he cried. But the girl couldn't stand up. There was no way, Darren could only go up and pick up the girl and leave the alley quickly. When he was silently running out of time, he stopped because he heard the next stage of the system. Ding, Phase 2 mission, pretend to be out of strength and let the girl leave first. Well? Is this going to be put up? Maybe the next stage of the task is to meet the enemy in a state of detachment? If this scene card comes true, I am afraid that it will bring a memory of dog blood to this little girl. P.S. The scene card is to pave the way for the back, and the next episode will end to play. Episode 94 Expulsion? Darren silently complained that the system was not human. However, he immediately pretended to be out of strength, and his legs fell to the ground with a soft leg. How are you? The girl was startled. She had just thought that this child was very powerful, but it turned out that it should only be able to use power for a short time. Me, it's okay, you go first, they're not looking for me, you'll slow down with me. Darren smiled mildly. The girl was stunned. By the time Darren thought the girl was going to grind with him and say that I wasn't going to leave alone, the girl had already turned and ran. Isn't this kid a little tough? Ding, release the third stage of the task, keep up with the girl's footsteps, when the girl is exhausted and lie down, carry the girl on her back for a kilometer. Good guy, run before him, get down before him. This is really speechless. The most crucial thing is that he also has to carry this guy for a kilometer. Darren's first reaction was to refuse, but he put up with it when he thought that the task had been carried out here. But in order to make the guy suffer more, he still slowly sneaked to the girl's neighborhood, and he took a bottle of water on the side of the road and washed his face. Inside the scene card given by the system, there was no one in the roadside store, it seemed that only the girl and him. Oh, and the man before. By the time Darren rubbed near the girl was lying on the ground with a deep despair on her face. Darren glanced around, and didn't see anyone here, not knowing what the girl's expression was. But for the sake of realism, he also showed a frightened expression. Eagerly, he walked over to the girl and said, "Hurry up, you lie on top of me." The girl was stunned to see him. It is estimated that he did not expect that Darren was out of strength and could still walk here. But she hesitated and climbed onto Darren's back. Ding, can use 100 father values, simulate the host going to a kilometer away, is it used? Use, Darren hastily chose to use it. His body is only 3 or 4 years old baby, what if this guy is not tall? And after he chose to use it, they instantly came to a kilometer away. Ding, release the fourth stage mission, blocking the girl's face. Front, and block a spell attack for the girl, then pull the girl out of the railing. Darren was stunned, there was no one around, what attack did he block? However, for the sake of the task, he still made a death-defying expression to block the girl's front. Then in the girl's shocked eyes, she jumped out of the railing, prompted by the system. Ding, release the fifth stage of the task, after walking for a while, slowly fall down, and say to the girl's back, "I'm okay, don't worry, you keep running forward and it's alright, Darren." Alright. It's almost like making a science fiction film under a green cloth. But he still completed the action in earnest. He slowly fell down and whispered to the girl's back, "I'm fine, you keep running forward, it's alright." Ding, the task has been fully completed, start projecting reality, projection is successful, the parties will know the content within a day. Darren. It's a little rough. He sighed deeply again. Back to God. In front of him was Malfoy looking at him with an angry expression. It's back. Not only did he not earn any rewards, but he also took 100 father points. Potter, you're finished, you dare to beat me, I must tell Daddy. Draco Malfoy looked at Darren angrily. He never imagined that he would be reprimanded like this. Even Darren punched him in the eye. This time, he must let Darren be criticized. He thought irritably, and then ran back to the dormitory, where he was going to tell his mother all of Darren's evil words. If Dad would definitely say that Darren was his brother, he would have to let Darren go. And the mother did not know this matter, so it will definitely be towards him. Darren has to be cleaned up, he's too big and too small. Darren looked at his back. Shook his head helplessly. Child, even the heavenly King Lao Tzu is useless. The younger brother of the famous Harry Potter. Who would agree to a bully who was expelled for bullying other classmates? But he found that Neville was scared to tears. Darren. Malfoy is going to sue his dad, will you be fired? I'm going to explain to Professor Snape that he can't expel you, and even if he does, I'm going to fire me, and I'm hurting you, Neville said in tears. He never imagined that someone would help him like this. He didn't want Darren to be fired. Darren skimmed his lips, and Malfoy would be blamed if he could fire him. Even a school trustee, under Dumbledore's eyes, could expel a student? At best, he came to school to scare him. Funny. But as a little father, he couldn't say that. He said in a tone that was afraid to scare Neville, Neville, you don't have to be afraid, even if I am really fired, it is what I deserve. After all, I did do something wrong, to fight violence when Malfoy wanted to hit you. If the principal were to expel me, I would have no objection. That being said, his face still turned extremely pale. There was some mist in her green eyes. Make him look still tolerant and kind. Ding, father plus 50, ding, father plus 30, ding, father plus 40, ding, in a series of father value reminders. The Quidditch stadium suddenly erupted in a cheer. Ron and Hermione cheered wildly. They hadn't noticed what was going on here in Neville, because they were too worried about Harry. It's even less clear that Darren is also involved. However, after Harry caught the golden snitch, the two of them quickly noticed what was happening here. Darren? What happened to you? Who bullied you? Hermione asked anxiously. She was always worried that Darren was being bullied. None of it came true, but she was still overly worried about Darren every time. Darren shook his head. No, it's all right. Unfortunately, Neville interrupted him and angrily told Hermione what had just happened. Oh my god, how can they fire Darren? I'm going to find Headmaster Dumbledore, and now only he can help Darren. By the way, Neville, you go to Professor McGonagall, and she likes Darren too much, so she can make her intercede. Ron, you go to Professor Freeway. Episode 95, Narcissa's Dream. Narcissa was dreaming. The dream seemed to be back to that winter. Draco was very young at the time, and she mistakenly took a pair of potions. The result was suddenly a child about the same age as Draco. And there is no magic at all, not even a wand can be used. She could only find a way to contact Lucius as soon as possible. Hopefully, this state can be solved. But Lucius didn't know where to go. She waited a day, and there was no reply from the other side. She had no choice but to go out of the house and find a house elf to help her. Who knew that after she found the house elf, what was waiting for her was not a loyal servant, but a terrible house elf. It took her out of Malfoy's house, sent her to Muggles, and handed her over to a few guys who didn't look good. As they talked, she learned that their target was not her, but her son Draco. It's just that her appearance makes some stunned house elves mistakenly believe that Draco brought it after being cast a soul-snatching spell. She tried to calm herself down as much as she could, thinking about how she could get out of here. Who knew that for 3 whole days, she had not found a chance to escape? She had been tied up by those people for 3 days, hungry for 3 days. She swore in her heart that when she went out, she would kill these people. Who knew that on the 4th day, those people had brought her bad news? It turned out that Lucius's side had already acted, and he had checked all the house elves and found the house elves who had been cast the soul-snatching spell. And followed the house elves and found some clues about these people. So those people thought that they had already discovered the house elf who had been cast the Soul Reaper curse in order to confuse them. And her little child must have been the bait released by the Malfoy family. The men were angry and hateful, ready to grab her and throw her to death outside. She was horrified and overwhelmed. The wife of the head of her Malfoy family was going to die here? And just when she was desperate, a small child rushed out. She looked at the child calmly and sarcastically. Thinking about the appearance of this child, it is probably just that one more person dies with her. Who knew that the child had so much strength that he had made a dash and killed the man who had grabbed her? She looked at the boy in surprise and was dragged outside by the boy. Those behind him were in hot pursuit. They felt that someone had come to her rescue, and perhaps she was a character. Maybe you can get some money for it. Even if it was nothing, they didn't want her to leave alive. You can't do it in vain. So there was a chase everywhere, and she was dragged forward by the boy, with only one thought in her mind, to run out. She, Narcissa, could not die here. Who knew that while running, the boy actually fell to the ground with no strength? Obviously, that kind of power cannot be used simply. The boy asked her to run first. It's not me they're looking for, you go first. Narcissa wanted to laugh. Those people may have only looked for her at first, but now the child is obviously the target of their pursuit. In the end, it is a child, it is stupid. So she turned around and left without hesitation. When she turned, she seemed to be able to see the surprise in the boy's eyes. Can Black be a good guy? What she didn't expect was that she was hungry and tired, and she didn't run far before she fell down. She huddled herself in the alley, praying that the men would not find themselves. However, she was horrified to find that those people had actually found her place. And she, without the wand, had been starved for so long and had no strength. She, Narcissa, was indeed a bad person, having just abandoned the little boy, and now she will be killed. She was not willing, she looked around in fear and panic. Even if you don't have the strength to do so, you have to struggle to get up. But it was of no use. Until she saw the boy. The boy's face was covered with beads of sweat, and he was wet with a large area. A face as pale as paper. Green Ying's eyes were also full of fear. Hurry up, you're lying on top of me. The boy squatted down. Small body, looks extra thin. A warm current gushed out of her heart, wanting to say that you yourself are out of strength, what else are you running to? But looking at his determined eyes, she actually thought that she could escape from heaven. So Narcissa stood up hard and lay on his back. She thought that if she could still get out alive, she must be grateful to this child. After that they went a long way. She couldn't remember exactly how the road went, only the boy's pale face, his sweaty forehead, and his incessant voice of encouragement. They ran out with difficulty. Thought I could leave smoothly. Who knew that after going out, there was a green light in front of them? Narcissa thought she was going to die. She thought with a bitter smile that it was better to die under the spell, not to be starved to death, to be thrown to death, that would be too humiliating. She closed her eyes and waited to die. Who knows, it's the boy who stands in his way again. She was shocked to find that the boy, after receiving a spell, could even carry her forward and run forward. They ran through the river lanes, and at last the boy took her over a small railing. Behind that is a water cave. The boy pushed her in, and she saw that at the end of the cave, it was Hogsmeade who had run forward in surprise, and she knew that it was a secret passage. When you go back, you can take revenge. She can survive. The boy, she thought, she must take home a good education, to treat him as if he were her own child, to teach him that he must never be so kind again. Especially, don't save someone like her Narcissa again. Only by the time she looked back, the boy had fallen backwards in silence. It was a stream of water. The boy's voice echoed faintly in the cave, I'm all right, you keep going, it's all right. Is it all right? Narcissa looked back in a daze. Suddenly, she rushed frantically over. No, it shouldn't. They have run to the end, how did they fall? How could such a small child, a child like Draco, protect her for so long, not have won?